In the summer of 2000, European football was about to witness something unprecedented, a revolution that would change the transfer market forever, redefine what it meant to be a superstar footballer, and create the most expensive, most glamorous, and ultimately most controversial team the sport had ever seen. This is the story of Real Madrid's Galacticos, a project so ambitious it bordered on madness, so extravagant it defied logic, and so captivating it held the entire football world spellbound for 6 incredible years. Picture this: the richest man in Spain walks into a room full of journalists and promises to sign the best player from their biggest rivals. Not just any player, but the captain of Barcelona, the man who embodied everything their enemies stood for. Most people would have laughed it off as presidential campaign nonsense, but Florentino Perez wasn't most people, and what happened next would shake Spanish football to its very core. The date was July 16, 2000, and Real Madrid had just elected a new president, Florentino Perez, a construction magnate who had built his fortune during Spain's economic boom, had defeated the incumbent Lorenzo Sanz by just over 3,000 votes. It was the first time in the club's history that a challenger had beaten a sitting president. But Perez hadn't won on promises alone. He had won by making the most audacious transfer pledge in football history. He had promised to sign Luis Figo. Now, you might be thinking, what's so special about that? Presidents make big signing promises all the time. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. Luis Figo wasn't just any player. He was Barcelona's captain, their golden boy, their Portuguese maestro who had spent 5 years at the Camp Nou, becoming a legend. He was untouchable, unsignable, and according to every expert in Spanish football, completely impossible to pry away from Catalonia. But Florentino Perez had been planning this heist for months. Behind closed doors, away from prying eyes and wagging tongues, he had approached Figo's agent with an offer that was too good to refuse. Not an offer to sign for Real Madrid, mind you, but something far more clever and far more dangerous. Perez offered Figo £1.6 million just to sign a piece of paper, a contract that stated if Perez won the Real Madrid presidency, Figo would join the club. If Perez lost, Figo could keep the money anyway. From Figo's perspective, this looked like the easiest payday in football history. Perez was trailing in the polls, had little chance of winning, and even if he did, surely Barcelona would offer a better contract to keep their star player. It was free money, a risk-free bet that would either line his pockets or give him leverage for a better deal at Camp Nou. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, as it turned out. When the votes were counted on that fateful July evening, Florentino Perez had pulled off the impossible. He was now president of Real Madrid, and buried somewhere in a lawyer's office was a contract with Luis Figo's signature on it. The football world was about to explode. The initial reaction was pure denial. Figo himself dismissed the rumors as fabrication, telling reporters he wasn't mad enough to do something like that. Barcelona fans laughed it off as typical Real Madrid mind games. Even Perez's own supporters wondered if their new president had lost his mind. But on July 24, 2000, the impossible became reality. Luis Figo was unveiled as a Real Madrid player. The scenes that followed were unlike anything football had ever witnessed. In Barcelona, Figo jerseys were burned in the streets. Posters were ripped down. The word traitor echoed through the Camp Nou. This wasn't just a transfer. It was a betrayal of the highest order. Figo's own teammates felt deceived. Pep Guardiola, who was godfather to one of Figo's daughters, couldn't believe what had happened. The Portuguese winger had become the most hated man in Catalonia overnight. But here's what made this transfer so revolutionary. The fee was €62 million, a world record that shattered every previous benchmark. Suddenly, football had entered a new era where no player was too expensive, no transfer too outrageous, no dream too big to chase. Perez had proven that with enough money and enough audacity, even the impossible could be bought. The reaction when Figo returned to Barcelona for the first time in October 2000 was seismic. Nearly 98,000 fans packed the Camp Nou, and their message was crystal clear. Banners reading "Traitor," "Judas," "Scum," and "Mercenary" adorned the stadium. When Figo emerged from the tunnel, the noise was deafening. He actually put his fingers to his ears, visibly shocked by the intensity of the hatred directed toward him. Throughout the match, every touch of the ball brought a cascade of missiles from the stands: oranges, bottles, cigarette lighters, even mobile phones rained down from the crowd. Figo, normally Real Madrid's designated corner taker, avoided the corner flags entirely that day. He simply couldn't get close enough to the Barcelona fans without risking serious injury. The psychological warfare was unlike anything the sport had ever seen, but this was just the beginning of Florentino Perez's master plan. The Figo signing had proven that his Galacticos project wasn't just presidential bluster. It was a serious business strategy designed to transform Real Madrid into the most powerful sporting brand on the planet. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Sign the world's best player every summer, dominate headlines around the globe, sell millions of jerseys, and use the commercial success to fund even more spectacular signings. The next target was even more ambitious. Zinedine Zidane, the French magician who had led his country to World Cup and European Championship glory, was playing for Juventus and seemed perfectly content in Turin, but Perez had learned from the Figo operation. Sometimes the most direct approach was the most effective one. The story goes that at a UEFA Gala dinner in Monte Carlo, Perez approached Zidane with a napkin. Written on it in French was a simple question: "Do you want to come and play at Madrid?" Zidane's response was equally simple: yes. Years later, the Frenchman would tell Vogue magazine that it was one of the happiest days of his life. Just like that, another impossible transfer was set in motion. In July 2001, Real Madrid broke their own world record, paying Juventus €77.5 million for Zinedine Zidane. At his unveiling, club president Perez declared that some players were simply born to play for Real Madrid, and Zidane was one such example. Alfredo Di Stefano, the club's honorary president and legendary striker, presented Zidane with the number 5 shirt. The Frenchman had chosen it because it was available and he didn't want to take a teammate's number. The impact was immediate, but not in the way anyone expected. Zidane's first season in Madrid was frustrating, inconsistent, and largely trophyless. He scored just 6 league goals and won in the Champions League as Real Madrid finished empty-handed domestically. Critics questioned whether the world's most expensive player was worth the astronomical fee. The pressure was enormous, the expectations unrealistic, and the scrutiny relentless. But football has a funny way of vindicating genius when it matters most. As the 2001 to 2002 season progressed toward its climax, Zidane began to show flashes of the magic that had made him the world's most coveted player. A crucial goal against Barcelona in El Clásico, the opening strike in a Champions League semi-final at the Camp Nou, Real Madrid's first victory at their rival's ground in 9 years. Suddenly, the pieces were falling into place. The Champions League final against Bayer Leverkusen at Hampden Park in Glasgow would become the defining moment of the early Galacticos era. Real Madrid were favourites, but football finals are rarely won on paper. When Raúl opened the scoring in the 8th minute, it looked like the script was writing itself. But Lucio's equalizer 5 minutes later reminded everyone that Leverkusen weren't there to make up the numbers. Then came the moment that justified every euro spent on the Galacticos project. Just before halftime, Roberto Carlos chased down a loose ball on the left wing, stretching every sinew to hook over a high, first-time cross into the penalty area. As the ball dropped from the Glasgow sky, Zinedine Zidane stood sideways to goal, just inside the box, watching and waiting with the patience of a predator. What happened next defied physics, logic, and belief. As the ball approached the turf, Zidane swiveled and unleashed a thunderous volley with his supposedly weaker left foot. The strike was perfection itself, arrowing into the top corner with such power and precision that Oliver Kahn, in the Leverkusen goal, could only watch in admiration. It was a goal that transcended sport and entered the realm of art. The celebration was pure emotion. Zidane ran toward the touchline with his mouth wide open, screaming in delight, his arms raised to the heavens. Years later, he would reflect on that moment with wonder. "I tried to score the same way, even during shooting for an advertisement, but it never happened again. Never. It was perfect the day it happened, but it never happened again." Real Madrid had won their 9th European Cup, and the Galacticos had their first major trophy. The goal has been cited as one of the greatest in Champions League history, a moment of individual brilliance that validated the entire philosophy behind the project. Sometimes, truly once is enough to achieve immortality. The success in Glasgow had proven the Galacticos concept could deliver when it mattered most, but Florentino Perez wasn't satisfied with just 2 superstars. His vision required a complete transformation of Real Madrid's identity, and the next signing would take the project to an entirely different stratosphere of global recognition. David Beckham wasn't just a footballer, he was a phenomenon, a cultural icon, whose influence stretched far beyond the boundaries of any pitch. When Manchester United's Golden Boy became available in the summer of 2003, Perez saw an opportunity that transcended mere sporting ambition. This was about conquering new markets, breaking into territories where football was still growing, and creating a brand so powerful it could generate revenue streams that traditional clubs could only dream of. The unveiling on July 2, 2003 was unlike anything football had ever witnessed. Nearly 1,000 journalists from 25 countries descended on Madrid's basketball facility. The timing wasn't coincidental either. The presentation was scheduled for 11 in the morning, perfectly positioned to catch the evening news broadcasts across Asia, where Beckham's popularity was absolutely stratospheric. When Alfredo Di Stefano handed Beckham the famous white shirt, it wasn't just a jersey change. It was a seismic shift in how football clubs approached the global marketplace. Beckham couldn't wear his iconic number 7 because it belonged to club captain Raúl, so he chose 23 instead, citing his admiration for basketball legend Michael Jordan. Even that decision became a marketing masterpiece, bridging the gap between different sports and different continents. The commercial impact was immediate and staggering. On that first day alone, Real Madrid sold 8,000 Beckham shirts. An Adidas spokesman summed it up perfectly. Put Beckham's name on any product, and Real Madrid didn't stop selling. This wasn't just about football anymore. This was about creating a global entertainment brand that happened to play the beautiful game. The numbers told the story of a revolution in progress. Real Madrid's income in 2002, the year before Beckham's arrival, stood at $260 million. 3 years later, that figure had nearly doubled to $515 million, with almost half coming from marketing and merchandising. The English midfielder had essentially paid for himself and then some. proving that the Galacticos model could be financially sustainable while pursuing sporting excellence. But the real genius lay in the strategic thinking behind these signings. Perez and his board had identified English football's global popularity and decided to capitalize on it. Beckham was just the beginning. Michael Owen and Jonathan Woodgate would follow, each bringing their own slice of the English market and their own commercial opportunities. The club was systematically conquering different demographics and different continents with surgical precision. The Asian tour that followed Beckham's signing became a template for modern football marketing. Real Madrid earned $6 million per match in exhibition games, selling 210,000 jerseys during a 17-day tour. When Beckham underwent his medical examination, Spanish insurance company Grupo Sanitas paid $400,000 just to sponsor the event, which was broadcast live by 39 networks worldwide. Even a routine medical check had become a global television event. Yet beneath the glittering surface of commercial success, something was rotting at the core of the project. The decision-making that had brought such spectacular individual talents to Madrid was becoming increasingly disconnected from the practical realities of building a winning team. The warning signs were there for anyone brave enough to look past the marketing campaigns and merchandise sales. The first major crack appeared in June 2003, less than 48 hours after Real Madrid had clinched the La Liga title on the final day of the season. Vicente del Bosque, the quiet, understated coach who had delivered 2 Champions League titles and 2 league championships in 4 years, was unceremoniously dismissed. The man who had lost just 3 games all season and had guided the team through an unbeaten run in their final 6 matches was suddenly deemed not good enough for the new era. Del Bosque's sacking sent shockwaves through the football world. Here was a coach who had won everything there was to win, who commanded respect from players and peers alike, who had successfully integrated superstars into a functioning team structure. The BBC called him the unluckiest manager ever sacked, and they weren't wrong. His crime wasn't failure. His crime was being too old-fashioned for Florentino Perez's brave new world. The president's reasoning revealed the dangerous thinking that was beginning to infect the Galacticos project. Del Bosque was criticized for being outdated, for not fitting the modern image that Madrid wanted to project. His appearance, his methods, his humble approach to management were seen as incompatible with the glamorous brand they were trying to build. Function was being sacrificed for form, substance for style. The players were furious. They had wanted Del Bosque to stay and made their feelings clear. The title celebration became a tense affair, with most of the squad reluctant to participate in official ceremonies without their beloved coach. Some players were even fined for missing events in protest. The harmony that Del Bosque had carefully cultivated was shattered overnight, replaced by resentment and confusion about the club's direction. Into this volatile situation stepped Carlos Queiroz, Manchester United's assistant coach, who was tasked with taking the Galacticos to the next level, but the damage was already done. The decision to fire Del Bosque had created a precedent that would haunt Real Madrid for years to come. Coaches were now expendable, regardless of their success, if they didn't fit the image requirements of the project. Even more damaging was the departure of Claude Makelele that same summer. The French defensive midfielder wasn't a Galactico in the traditional sense. He didn't sell shirts or generate headlines. He didn't score spectacular goals or produce moments of individual magic. What he did was something far more valuable, but infinitely less marketable. He made the team work. Makelele's role was to provide the defensive foundation that allowed the superstars to shine. He broke up opposition attacks, covered for advancing fullbacks, and gave players like Zidane and Figo the freedom to focus on creating magic in the final third. He was the oil in the engine, invisible but essential, unglamorous but irreplaceable. When Makelele asked for an improved contract after Del Bosque's dismissal, feeling insecure about his position in the new regime, he was met with indifference. The club seemed more interested in acquiring another attacking superstar than rewarding the player who made their system function. Encouraged by teammates who recognized his importance, Makelele decided he deserved better treatment. Chelsea were more than happy to provide it. Paying £16.8 million for a player Real Madrid seemed eager to discard. At Stamford Bridge, manager Claudio Ranieri proclaimed that Makelele would be the battery of the team, the power source that would drive everything they wanted to achieve. It was a level of appreciation that Madrid had never shown. Zinedine Zidane's reaction to Makelele's departure became one of football's most prophetic quotes. "Why put another layer of gold paint on the Bentley when you are losing the entire engine?" The French maestro understood what the Real Madrid hierarchy had failed to grasp. You could have all the individual talent in the world, but without the right foundation, without the players who did the unglamorous work, the whole structure would collapse. As a replacement for Makelele's defensive duties, Real Madrid promoted a few youngsters from their Castilla youth team, including a defensive midfielder named Borja Fernandez. The message was clear. Defensive work wasn't valued enough to warrant a major signing. All the money, all the attention, all the focus was reserved for the glamorous positions, the marketable roles, the players who could sell shirts in Shanghai and Sao Paulo. The consequences were swift and brutal. The 2003-04 season became a masterclass in how not to manage a football team. Despite having more individual talent than perhaps any squad in history, Real Madrid's performances were disjointed, unbalanced, and ultimately unsuccessful. They were eliminated from the Champions League quarter-finals by Monaco on away goals, lost the domestic cup final to Zaragoza after extra time, and suffered the humiliation of finishing fourth in La Liga. That fourth-place finish was particularly devastating. Valencia claimed the title while Real Madrid lost their final 5 league matches, a collapse that seemed to symbolize everything wrong with the project. The team that was supposed to dominate European football couldn't even secure a Champions League place for the following season. It was the last time Real Madrid would finish below second place until 2014, a statistic that speaks to just how catastrophic that campaign truly was. The rotating door of coaches that followed became a symbol of institutional chaos. 5 different managers tried and failed to make the Galacticos work over the next 3 years. Carlos Queiroz was followed by José Antonio Camacho, then Mariano García Ramón, then Brazilian Vanderlei Luxemburgo, and finally Juan Ramón López Caro. Each arrived with optimism and departed with failure, unable to solve the fundamental contradictions at the heart of the project. The term Galactico itself began to take on negative connotations. What had once represented excellence and ambition now symbolized excess and imbalance. Critics pointed to Beckham's pre-season tours of Asia as evidence that the club cared more about marketing than winning. The focus on commercial priorities over sporting success became a stick with which to beat everything Real Madrid represented. Meanwhile, Barcelona were busy building something far more dangerous than any individual superstar. Under President Joan Laporta and coach Frank Rijkaard, they had assembled a young, hungry team that played with the kind of collective intensity the Galacticos had lost somewhere between the photo shoots and commercial obligations. When they won La Liga in 2005, it felt like more than just a title. It felt like a changing of the guard, a generational shift that left Real Madrid looking increasingly outdated and disconnected from modern football. The contrast couldn't have been starker. While Real Madrid chased headlines and jersey sales, Barcelona were developing players like Lionel Messi, Xavi, and Andrés Iniesta. While the Galacticos posed for magazine covers, their rivals were perfecting a style of play that would revolutionize the sport. The irony was delicious and devastating in equal measure. The club that had spent hundreds of millions on ready-made superstars was being outclassed by teenagers from the academy next door. But perhaps the most telling indication of how far the project had fallen came in the form of silence. The Santiago Bernabéu, once a cauldron of noise and intimidation, began to emit a different kind of sound during those barren years. It wasn't the roar of approval or even the whistle of disapproval. It was something far worse for any performer: indifference. The fans who had once believed they were witnessing history were now watching expensive players go through the motions in meaningless matches. The training ground stories that leaked out painted an even grimmer picture. Players arriving late, skipping sessions, treating the whole enterprise like an extended exhibition tour rather than professional football. The work ethic that had once characterized Real Madrid's greatest teams had been replaced by an entitlement culture where individual reputation mattered more than collective sacrifice. When your defensive midfielder can be sold to fund another attacking signing, what message does that send about the values driving the organization? Injuries began to mount, but not the kind you might expect from a team pushing physical limits in pursuit of excellence. These were soft tissue problems, recurring niggles, the kind of issues that suggest players weren't maintaining peak condition during the off-season. When your primary focus becomes commercial appearances and global tours, when rest periods are filled with promotional obligations rather than recovery, the human body eventually rebels against the demands being placed upon it. The tactical problems became increasingly obvious to anyone willing to look beyond the star names on the team sheet. Without Makelele's defensive discipline, the midfield became a revolving door for opposition attacks. Zidane and Figo were expected to track back and help defensively, but neither had ever been asked to do such unglamorous work during their peak years. The result was a team that looked spectacular in possession but fell apart the moment they lost the ball. Opposing coaches began to see Real Madrid not as an insurmountable challenge, but as a tactical puzzle with obvious solutions. Press high, force turnovers in midfield, and exploit the acres of space left behind by attacking players who didn't fancy the defensive side of the game. Teams that would once have been intimidated by the mere presence of such famous players now approached matches against Madrid with genuine confidence. The Champions League became a particular source of embarrassment. This was supposed to be the competition where the Galacticos proved their worth on the biggest stage, where all those transfer fees and commercial deals would be justified by European glory. Instead, they became a cautionary tale about how individual talent without collective purpose leads nowhere. Early exits, disappointing performances, and the gradual realization that they were no longer considered among Europe's elite clubs. Perhaps most damaging was the psychological impact on the players themselves. Zidane, who had produced that moment of magic in Glasgow, found himself increasingly isolated in a team that couldn't provide him with the platform to excel. The French maestro was still capable of individual brilliance, but football had moved beyond the era where one player could single-handedly determine outcomes. He needed teammates who understood their roles, coaches who valued tactical discipline, and a system that prioritized winning over everything else. Beckham's situation was even more complex. The English midfielder had arrived as the poster boy for global expansion, the player who would open doors in markets that traditional European clubs struggled to penetrate. But on the pitch, he was being asked to fulfill a role that didn't match his skill set or the tactical demands of elite football. His crossing ability remained exceptional, but in a team that lacked proper strikers, what good were perfect deliveries into an empty penalty area? The Brazilian Ronaldo's arrival in 2002 had initially seemed like another masterstroke, adding the world's most lethal finisher to an already star-studded attack, but injuries had robbed him of the explosive pace that had made him virtually unstoppable, and the tactical chaos surrounding the team meant he rarely received the kind of service that had made him so deadly at previous clubs. Watching him struggle to impact matches became a metaphor for the entire project's decline. The youth system, once the pride of Real Madrid, began to wither under neglect. Why invest time and resources developing young players when you could simply buy established stars from other clubs? The academy that had produced legends like Raúl and Iker Casillas was relegated to afterthought status, its graduates finding fewer and fewer opportunities to break into a first team obsessed with big names and bigger transfer fees. Financial concerns started creeping into discussions around the Bernabeu boardroom. While the commercial revenue remained healthy, the lack of sporting success was beginning to impact some income streams. Champions League qualification became uncertain, reducing television payments and prize money. Sponsors started questioning whether association with an underperforming team, regardless of its star power, was delivering the return on investment they had expected. The coaching carousel became increasingly desperate and short-sighted. Each new appointment was heralded as the solution to all problems, the tactical genius who would finally unlock the potential of this incredible collection of talent. But how could any coach succeed when the fundamental structure of the team was flawed, when defensive balance was sacrificed for attacking glamour, when individual egos took precedence over collective responsibility? Press conferences became exercises in damage limitation rather than confident proclamations of ambition. Questions about tactical formations were met with discussions about individual player qualities. Inquiries about team chemistry were deflected toward talk of commercial success and global reach. The disconnect between sporting reality and public relations messaging became increasingly obvious to everyone except those making the decisions. Fan groups that had initially embraced the Galacticos concept with enthusiasm began organizing protests and demonstrations. The ultras, who had once serenaded every match with passionate support, found themselves watching a team that seemed to care more about appearance fees than actual football. The emotional connection between club and supporters, built over decades of shared triumphs and disappointments, was being eroded by the relentless pursuit of commercial opportunities. Even former players began speaking out about the direction of their beloved club. Legends who had helped build Real Madrid's reputation through blood, sweat, and genuine sacrifice watched in dismay as their legacy was being tarnished by a project that valued marketing metrics over match results. Their criticism carried extra weight because it came from men who understood what it truly meant to represent the institution. The medical staff reported increasing instances of mental fatigue among players, a condition that couldn't be treated with traditional therapies or rest periods. When your professional life becomes a constant performance, when every training session might be interrupted by commercial obligations, when your value is measured more by social media followers than goals and assists, the psychological toll becomes enormous. International tournaments provided temporary respites for some Galacticos, opportunities to remember why they had fallen in love with football in the first place. Playing for their countries, surrounded by teammates who shared common goals and values, they often rediscovered the passion and intensity that had made them superstars in the first place. But returning to Madrid meant re-entering an environment where such qualities seemed increasingly irrelevant. The 2005 to 2006 season represented the absolute nadir of the Galacticos experiment. Not a single major trophy was won, not even a domestic cup to provide some consolation for the faithful supporters who continued attending matches despite their mounting frustrations. The team that was supposed to dominate world football had become a laughingstock, a cautionary tale told in coaching seminars about what happens when commercial considerations override sporting logic. By early 2006, Florentino Perez found himself facing a crisis that no amount of marketing genius could solve. The project that had begun with such promise and ambition was collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. The man who had revolutionized football transfers was discovering that buying superstars and building championship teams were entirely different challenges requiring completely different skill sets. The writing was on the wall, visible to everyone except perhaps the president himself. Real Madrid needed more than new signings or another coaching change. They needed a fundamental rethinking of what it meant to be a successful football club in the modern era. The Galacticos experiment was drawing to a close, leaving behind valuable lessons about the dangers of prioritizing style over substance, marketing over merit, and individual brilliance over collective excellence. The pressure mounting on Florentino Perez throughout 2005 was unlike anything he had experienced during his rise to power. The man who had once commanded boardrooms with the confidence of someone who could make the impossible happen now found himself fielding increasingly hostile questions from journalists, supporters, and even his own board members. Every press conference became a trial by fire. Every match result a referendum on his leadership. Every transfer rumor another opportunity for critics to dissect the fundamental flaws in his grand vision. The statistics were damning and impossible to ignore. Since Vicente del Bosque's dismissal in 2003, Real Madrid had cycled through 5 different coaches without winning a single major trophy. The Champions League, which had provided the Galacticos with their moment of greatest triumph in Glasgow, had become an annual source of humiliation, early exits, tactical meltdowns, and performances that suggested the players had forgotten how to function as a cohesive unit characterized their European campaigns during these barren years. The domestic situation was equally troubling, but in different ways. La Liga had become Barcelona's playground, with Frank Rijkaard's young, dynamic team playing the kind of football that made Real Madrid's star-studded lineup look antiquated and predictable. The Catalonian rivals weren't just winning matches, they were winning hearts and minds, with a style of play that emphasized collective intelligence over individual brilliance, tactical discipline over commercial appeal. What made Barcelona's success particularly galling for Madrid supporters was how they had achieved it. While the Galacticos project had spent hundreds of millions on ready-made superstars, their rivals had invested in youth development, tactical innovation, and long-term planning. Players like Ronaldinho, who had chosen Barcelona over Real Madrid in 2003, were producing the kind of magical moments that the Bernabeu faithful had expected from their own expensive imports. The contrast in playing styles couldn't have been starker. Barcelona moved the ball with precision and purpose, each pass serving a tactical objective, each player understanding their role within the larger system. Real Madrid, despite having arguably more individual talent than any team in football history, often resembled a collection of soloists trying to perform a symphony without a conductor. The beautiful game had evolved beyond the era where individual genius could compensate for tactical chaos. Training sessions at Valdebebas became increasingly tense affairs as coaches struggled to implement systems that could accommodate so many attacking players while maintaining defensive stability. The fundamental mathematics of football hadn't changed. You still needed players willing to do the unglamorous work, to make the covering runs, to sacrifice personal statistics for team success. But the Galacticos project had systematically devalued such contributions, creating a culture where defensive responsibility was seen as beneath the station of true superstars. The psychological dynamics within the squad had deteriorated to the point where team meetings resembled diplomatic summits. More than football strategy sessions, players had to be managed like heads of state, their egos carefully navigated, their individual needs balanced against collective requirements. Coaches found themselves spending more time on man management than tactical preparation, trying to create harmony among players who had never learned to subordinate personal ambition to team objectives. Media coverage of Real Madrid during this period reflected the growing disconnect between expectation and reality. International journalists who had once flocked to the Spanish capital to document the latest Galactico signing now arrived with different agendas. They came to analyze what had gone wrong, to understand how the most expensive team in football history could struggle against opponents with a fraction of their budget and star power. The commercial empire that Perez had built remained impressive on paper, but cracks were beginning to show even in this supposedly strongest aspect of the project. Sponsors were asking difficult questions about return on investment. When the team they were associated with couldn't deliver success where it mattered most, marketing campaigns that had once celebrated triumph now had to creatively explain away failure, a much more challenging proposition for even the most skilled public relations professionals. Asian markets, which had been so crucial to the Galacticos' commercial success, began showing signs of fatigue with the constant promotional tours and exhibition matches. Fans in these territories had initially been thrilled to see their heroes in person, but they also wanted to witness winning football, not expensive players going through the motions in meaningless friendlies. The novelty of celebrity appearances performances was wearing off, replaced by demands for actual sporting achievement. The Santiago Bernabeu itself had become a monument to unfulfilled potential. Walking through the corridors adorned with images of past glories, one could feel the weight of history pressing down on the current generation of players and staff. The ghosts of Di Stefano, Puskas, and other legends seemed to whisper reproachfully about standards that were no longer being met, traditions that were being dishonored by the pursuit of commercial success over sporting excellence. Match days at the Bernabeu took on a different character during these troubled years. The atmosphere was often subdued, lacking the electric energy that had once made it one of football's most intimidating venues. Supporters arrived with hope but left with disappointment so regularly that many began staying away altogether. Season ticket renewals dropped, not because of financial hardship, but because of emotional exhaustion from watching their beloved club stumble from one crisis to another. The players themselves were not immune to the mounting pressure and criticism. Zinedine Zidane, who had provided the Galacticos with their greatest moment in that Glasgow final, found his performances increasingly scrutinized as fans and media searched for someone to blame for the team's decline. The French maestro was still capable of moments of individual brilliance, but they seemed to occur in isolation, disconnected from any broader tactical framework or team objective. David Beckham's situation became particularly complex as his time in Madrid progressed. The English midfielder had delivered everything promised in terms of commercial value and global reach, but his impact on the pitch remained frustratingly limited. His crossing ability was as precise as ever, but crosses are only effective when there are players making intelligent runs into the penalty area. His free kick technique remained exemplary, but set-piece goals couldn't compensate for systemic tactical problems that affected every aspect of play. The Brazilian Ronaldo's struggles during this period were perhaps the most poignant symbol of the project's decline. Once the most feared striker in world football, capable of single-handedly deciding matches through pure instinct and finishing ability, he now appeared isolated and ineffective within a team structure that couldn't provide him with the service he needed to excel. Watching him labor through matches where he barely touched the ball became a metaphor for everything wrong with the Galacticos approach. Youth development at Real Madrid had been virtually abandoned during the Galacticos era, as the focus shifted entirely toward acquiring established stars from other clubs. The academy system that had once been the envy of world football, producing legends like Raúl and Iker Casillas, was now treated as an afterthought. Young players with genuine potential found themselves overlooked in favor of expensive imports, who often contributed less to team success than homegrown talents would have. The coaching situation had become almost farcical by 2005, with managers arriving and departing so regularly that players stopped bothering to fully adapt to new tactical systems. Each new appointment brought fresh hope that quickly evaporated when it became clear that the fundamental problems lay deeper than coaching methods or motivational techniques. You cannot build a sustainable football team when the foundation is built on sand, when every decision is made for short-term publicity rather than long-term success. Financial analysts began questioning whether the Galacticos model was even economically viable in the long term. While commercial revenues remained healthy, the lack of sporting success was beginning to impact other income streams. Champions League qualification, once taken for granted, was no longer guaranteed. Television payments and prize money were reduced accordingly. The cost of constantly changing coaches and dealing with unhappy players was mounting steadily. Opposition teams had long since figured out how to neutralize Real Madrid's threat. The tactical blueprint was simple: press high to disrupt their possession, exploit the spaces left by attacking players who didn't track back, and maintain discipline to avoid being caught by individual moments of brilliance. Teams that would once have been intimidated by facing the Galacticos now approach such matches with confidence, knowing that tactical organization could triumph over individual talent. The international reputation of Spanish football was also suffering because of Real Madrid's decline. La Liga's profile had been enormously enhanced by the global attention generated by the Galacticos project, but prolonged failure by such a high-profile team was beginning to damage the league's credibility. Barcelona's success provided some compensation, but having one of the world's most famous clubs consistently underperforming was not good for Spanish football's overall image. Player relationships within the squad had deteriorated to the point where team chemistry became a luxury rather than a given. Stars who had been accustomed to being the focal point of their previous teams now had to share spotlight and responsibility with equally demanding personalities. The result was often a collection of individuals rather than a cohesive unit, each player focused on personal performance rather than collective success. The medical staff reported increasing instances of mysterious injuries that seem to correlate with important matches or difficult periods. When players are unhappy with their situation, when they feel disconnected from the team's objectives, when they sense that their individual reputation matters more than collective achievement, the motivation to push through minor physical discomfort diminishes significantly. The warrior mentality that characterizes great teams was notably absent from this group of talented but disconnected individuals. Press conferences became exercises in creative interpretation as coaches and executives tried to explain away obvious problems without directly criticizing the players or the project's fundamental philosophy. Questions about tactical balance were met with discussions of individual quality. Inquiries about team spirit were deflected toward commercial achievements. The disconnect between what everyone could see on the pitch and what was being said in official communications became increasingly obvious and embarrassing. Former Real Madrid legends began speaking out more frequently about their concerns regarding the club's direction. These were men who understood what it meant to represent the institution, who had sacrificed personal glory for team success, who had built the reputation that the current generation was squandering. Their criticism carried particular weight because it came from people who loved the club enough to risk unpopularity by telling uncomfortable truths. The ripple effects of Real Madrid's problems extended throughout Spanish football and beyond. Young players dreaming of professional careers began to question whether the Galacticos model represented the future of the sport or a cautionary tale about what happens when commercial considerations override sporting logic. Coaches at all levels found themselves having to explain to ambitious players why tactical discipline and defensive responsibility were just as important as individual flair and media attention. By the winter of 2005, it had become clear to everyone, except perhaps Florentino Perez himself, that the Galacticos experiment required fundamental restructuring or complete abandonment. The project that had begun with such ambition and promise was collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. The man who had revolutionized football transfers was about to learn that building a sustainable football dynasty required different skills entirely from those needed to execute spectacular individual signings. The stage was set for a reckoning that would determine not just the future of Real Madrid, but the entire philosophy behind modern football's approach to team building. The Galacticos had provided the sport with unforgettable moments and valuable lessons, but their time was drawing to a close. What remained was to see whether the institution could learn from its mistakes and rebuild on more solid foundations, or whether the pursuit of commercial success had permanently damaged one of football's most storied clubs, ride clubs. The final months of 2005 brought a series of events that would ultimately seal the fate of the Galacticos project. What had begun as whispers in Madrid's sports bars and newspaper columns was now being discussed openly in boardrooms and television studios across Europe. The emperor's new clothes were being revealed as nothing more than expensive fabric with no substance underneath. The turning point came not with a single catastrophic defeat, but through the accumulation of 1,000 small humiliations, matches where Real Madrid dominated possession but created nothing meaningful, games where individual brilliance flickered briefly before being snuffed out by tactical chaos, performances that left even the most loyal supporters questioning whether they were watching the same club that had once struck fear into the hearts of opponents across the continent. The Champions League campaign that season became a perfect microcosm of everything wrong with the project. Group stage matches that should have been routine victories turned into nerve-wracking affairs where the outcome remained in doubt until the final whistle. The team that was supposed to be conquering Europe was struggling against opponents whose entire squad budgets wouldn't have covered a single Galacticos annual salary. When elimination finally came, it arrived not with the drama of a heroic last-stand defeat, but with the whimper of tactical confusion and individual errors. The post-match analysis revealed what many had suspected but few had dared to voice. This collection of superstars had forgotten how to play as a team. They had become so focused on individual moments of brilliance that they had lost sight of the collective sacrifice required for sustained success. The dressing room atmosphere after that final European defeat was reportedly toxic. Players who had once shared the joy of triumph in Glasgow now avoided eye contact, each lost in private contemplation of how their careers had reached such a low point. These were men who had conquered the world with their previous clubs, who had lifted trophies and earned individual accolades that most footballers could only dream of achieving. Yet here they were, unable to function as a cohesive unit despite possessing more raw talent than perhaps any team in football history. Florentino Perez found himself in an impossible position as 2006 dawned. The commercial success of the project remained undeniable, with revenues continuing to climb and global brand recognition reaching unprecedented levels. Sponsors were still willing to pay premium prices for association with Real Madrid's star-studded lineup. Television audiences around the world still tuned in to watch the Galacticos, even if they were increasingly tuning in to witness failure rather than triumph. But football is ultimately about winning, and on that most fundamental measure, the project had become an expensive failure. The boardroom meetings that had once celebrated record-breaking signings and marketing coups now focused on damage limitation and crisis management. Directors who had initially embraced Perez's revolutionary vision began asking uncomfortable questions about return on investment and long-term sustainability. The Spanish media, which had initially celebrated the Galacticos as a national treasure that enhanced La Liga's global profile, began turning with the ruthless efficiency that characterizes press coverage everywhere. Newspapers that had once fought for exclusive interviews with Madrid's superstars now seemed more interested in analyzing what had gone wrong than celebrating what had been achieved. The narrative had shifted from triumph to tragedy, from revolution to cautionary tale. Opposition coaches, who had once spent sleepless nights devising strategies to contain Real Madrid's attacking threats, now spoke openly about their confidence when facing the former giants. The psychological advantage that had once been automatic when opponents saw the Madrid team sheet had evaporated completely. Instead of intimidation, there was anticipation. Instead of fear, there was opportunity. The tactical problems had become so obvious that even casual observers could identify the structural flaws that plagued every performance. The midfield remained unbalanced, lacking the defensive discipline that Makelele had provided and that no amount of attacking talent could compensate for. The defense looked uncertain, constantly exposed by teammates who viewed tracking back as beneath their station. The attack, despite containing some of the world's most gifted players, often appeared disjointed and predictable. Training sessions at Valdebebas took on an increasingly desperate quality as coaches tried everything they could think of to unlock the potential that everyone could see but no one could access. Tactical drills were abandoned when players showed little interest in learning systems that might limit their individual freedom. Physical conditioning sessions became battles of will between staff trying to maintain professional standards, and players who seemed to believe their reputations exempted them from basic requirements. The psychological impact on individual players varied dramatically. Some, like Zidane, maintained their professionalism and continued producing moments of individual excellence despite the chaos surrounding them. Others seemed to retreat into themselves, their confidence shattered by the constant criticism and the obvious dysfunction within the team structure. A few appeared to embrace the celebrity lifestyle that came with being a Galactico while losing interest in the actual football that had made them famous in the first place. Medical reports from this period paint a concerning picture of players struggling with various forms of stress-related issues. When your professional environment becomes a constant source of pressure and disappointment, when every match feels like a referendum on your entire career, when individual reputation becomes more important than collective success, the psychological toll becomes enormous. Some players requested moves away from Madrid, preferring the uncertainty of new challenges to the certainty of continued frustration. The youth academy, once the pride of Real Madrid and a symbol of the club's commitment to developing future generations of talent, had been virtually abandoned during the Galacticos era. Young players with genuine potential found themselves competing not just for playing time, but for basic attention from coaching staff whose focus remained entirely on managing the egos and expectations of expensive imports. The pipeline that had once produced legends like Raúl and Casillas had been allowed to dry up completely. International tournaments provided temporary relief for some Galacticos, offering opportunities to remember why they had fallen in love with football in the first place, playing for their national teams, surrounded by teammates who shared common objectives and values. Many rediscovered the passion and intensity that had made them superstars originally, but these interludes only highlighted how dysfunctional their club situation had become. The financial implications of the project's sporting failure were beginning to manifest in ways that even the most optimistic executives could no longer ignore. While commercial revenues remained strong, the lack of Champions League qualification meant reduced television payments and prize money. Sponsors began asking pointed questions about whether association with an underperforming team, regardless of its star power, was delivering the brand enhancement they had paid for. Stadium attendances, while still respectable by most standards, showed concerning trends as the season progressed. The most passionate supporters, those who had created the intimidating atmosphere that had once made the Bernabeu a fortress, were staying away in increasing numbers. They hadn't abandoned their love for Real Madrid, but they couldn't bear to watch their beloved club continue its painful decline under the weight of misplaced priorities and tactical confusion. The contrast with Barcelona's trajectory during this period was particularly painful for Madrid supporters to witness. Their greatest rivals had assembled a young, dynamic team that played with the kind of collective intensity and tactical sophistication that the Galacticos had somehow lost along the way. When Barcelona won La Liga in 2005, it wasn't just a title victory, it was a statement about different approaches to building sustainable success in modern football. Press conferences became increasingly surreal affairs where obvious problems were discussed in coded language and diplomatic euphemisms. Journalists asked direct questions about tactical balance and received answers about individual quality. Inquiries about team chemistry were met with statistics about commercial success. The disconnect between what everyone could observe on the pitch and what was being communicated officially became a source of dark humor among football observers. The coaching carousel had become so rapid that players stopped bothering to fully adapt to new systems before the next change arrived. Each new appointment brought temporary hope that quickly evaporated when it became clear that the fundamental problems lay deeper than tactical methods or motivational techniques. You cannot build a sustainable team when when the foundation consists of individual egos rather than collective commitment. Former Madrid legends began speaking out with increasing frequency about their concerns regarding the club's direction. These were men who understood what it meant to represent the institution at its highest level, who had made the personal sacrifices necessary to achieve greatness, who had built the reputation that the current generation appeared to be squandering. Their criticism carried particular weight because it came from people who loved the club enough to risk popularity by telling uncomfortable truths. The ripple effects extended throughout Spanish football and beyond. Young players across the world who had once dreamed of joining the Galacticos now questioned whether such an environment would actually help or hinder their development. Coaches at all levels found themselves explaining to ambitious players why tactical discipline and defensive responsibility were just as important as individual flair and media attention. By spring 2006, the writing was on the wall in letters large enough for everyone to read. The Galacticos experiment had provided football with unforgettable moments and valuable lessons, but it had also demonstrated the dangers of prioritizing commercial success over sporting excellence. The project that had begun with such revolutionary ambition was ending with conventional failure. The boardroom discussions that would ultimately determine Florentino Perez's fate were reportedly tense affairs where years of accumulated frustration finally found expression. Directors who had initially supported the president's vision now questioned whether the pursuit of global marketing success had permanently damaged one of football's most prestigious institutions. The numbers were stark. No major trophies since 2003, despite spending more money on players than any club in history. The final straw came not with a single dramatic defeat, but with the gradual realization that the problems had become systemic and possibly irreversible under current leadership. The culture that had been created around individual stardom rather than collective success had infected every aspect of the club's operations. Players expected special treatment, coaches were afraid to impose discipline, and executives prioritized commercial considerations over sporting logic. When Florentino Perez announced his resignation in February 2006, it marked the end of an era that had promised to revolutionize football but had ultimately served as a cautionary tale about the limits of ambition without proper foundation. The man who had shocked the world by signing Luis Figo was leaving behind a club that was commercially successful but spiritually empty, globally recognized but competitively irrelevant. The Galacticos project had lasted 6 years, delivered moments of individual brilliance that would be remembered forever, and generated commercial success that transformed football's economic landscape. But it had also proven that you cannot simply buy greatness, that sustainable success requires more than star power, and that the most expensive ingredients do not automatically produce the finest results. As the dust settled on this extraordinary experiment, football's power brokers around the world began digesting the lessons that had been learned at such enormous cost. The beautiful game had been given a masterclass in both the possibilities and the perils of modern football's commercial revolution. The question now was whether anyone had been paying attention to what really mattered. The announcement came like a thunderbolt across the Spanish capital on February 27, 2006. Florentino Perez, the man who had promised to revolutionize football and deliver galactic success, was stepping down as president of Real Madrid. The resignation statement was brief, almost clinical in its tone, but the implications were seismic. The architect of the most ambitious sporting project in history was walking away from his creation, leaving behind a legacy that was simultaneously brilliant and catastrophic. The timing couldn't have been more symbolic. Real Madrid sat in 4th place in La Liga, their Champions League dreams already extinguished for another year, their trophy cabinet gathering dust since that fateful decision to dismiss Vicente del Bosque 3 years earlier. The man who had begun his presidency by pulling off the impossible transfer of Luis Figo was ending it with the admission that money alone couldn't buy success. In his farewell address to the members, Perez spoke of economic achievements and global expansion, of record revenues and unprecedented brand recognition. He cited statistics about shirt sales and television audiences, about commercial partnerships and marketing reach. But there was one statistic he couldn't address, one number that rendered all the others meaningless. 0 major trophies won since 2003. 0 evidence that the most expensive squad in football history could actually play football as a team. The reaction across the football world was immediate and polarizing. Critics who had spent years predicting this moment felt vindicated, their warnings about prioritizing style over substance finally proven correct. They pointed to the tactical chaos, the defensive imbalance, the culture of individualism that had infected every aspect of the club's operations. Here was proof, they argued, that football remained a team sport despite the modern obsession with superstar signings. But supporters of the Galacticos philosophy weren't ready to concede defeat entirely. They highlighted the commercial revolution that had transformed football's economic landscape, the global audiences that had been attracted to the sport, the marketing innovations that had elevated clubs from local institutions to worldwide brands. The project may have failed on the pitch, they argued, but it had succeeded in ways that traditional football minds couldn't comprehend. The players themselves reacted to Perez's departure with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Some had thrived under the spotlight and attention that came with being a Galactico, enjoying the celebrity lifestyle and global recognition that accompanied their astronomical salaries. Others had grown frustrated with the tactical confusion and lack of clear direction, yearning for the kind of structured environment where their talents could flourish within a coherent system. Zinedine Zidane's response was particularly telling. The French maestro had been the crown jewel of the project, the player whose moment of magic in Glasgow had seemingly validated the entire philosophy. But he had also witnessed firsthand how the pursuit of individual brilliance could undermine collective success. His comments about losing the engine while adding gold paint to the Bentley had proven prophetic, a warning that had gone unheeded until it was too late. David Beckham found himself in an especially complex position. The English midfielder had delivered everything promised in terms of commercial value and global reach, transforming Real Madrid into a truly worldwide brand that transcended traditional football boundaries. His signing had opened doors in markets that European clubs had never successfully penetrated, generating revenues that exceeded even the most optimistic projections, yet his on-field contribution remained frustratingly limited by tactical systems that couldn't accommodate so many attacking players. The Brazilian Ronaldo's situation epitomized the tragic waste of talent that had characterized the project's final years. Once the most feared striker in world football, capable of single-handedly deciding matches through pure instinct and finishing ability, he had become a peripheral figure in a team that couldn't provide him with the service necessary to excel. Watching him labor through matches where he barely influenced proceedings had become a weekly reminder of how tactical dysfunction could neutralize even the most extraordinary individual gifts. The coaching situation had descended into complete farce by the time of Perez's resignation. 5 different managers in 3 years had tried and failed to solve the puzzle of making the Galacticos function as a cohesive unit. Each had arrived with different philosophies and methods, but all had encountered the same fundamental problem. You cannot build a sustainable team when individual egos take precedence over collective responsibility. The most damaging aspect of the entire experiment wasn't the money wasted or the trophies not won, but the culture that had been created around the idea that football success could be purchased rather than earned. Young players throughout the Real Madrid system had grown up believing that individual talent mattered more than tactical discipline, that defensive responsibility was someone else's job, that personal statistics were more important than team results. The Youth Academy, once the pride of Spanish football and a symbol of the club's commitment to developing future generations, had been virtually abandoned during the Galacticos era. The pipeline that had produced legends like Raúl and Iker Casillas had been allowed to deteriorate, while all resources and attention focused on acquiring ready-made stars from other clubs. The institutional knowledge about player development had been sacrificed for short-term commercial gains. International observers began analyzing the Galacticos project as a case study in modern football's evolution and potential pitfalls. Business schools incorporated the Real Madrid experience into their curricula as an example of how excessive focus on marketing can undermine core operational effectiveness. Sports science programs examined the psychological dynamics that had prevented such talented individuals from functioning as a successful team. The media narrative surrounding Perez's departure reflected broader questions about the direction of professional football in the 21st century. Had the sport become too commercialized, too focused on entertainment value rather than competitive integrity? Could traditional football values survive in an era of global marketing and astronomical transfer fees? The Galacticos experiment had provided a definitive answer. Commercial success without sporting achievement was ultimately unsustainable. Opposition coaches who had initially feared facing Real Madrid's star-studded lineup now spoke openly about their confidence when meeting the former giants. The psychological advantage that had once been automatic when opponents saw the Madrid team sheet had evaporated completely. Instead of intimidation, there was anticipation. Instead of respect, there was opportunity. The aura of invincibility had been replaced by a reputation for tactical chaos and defensive vulnerability. The financial implications of the project's sporting failure were becoming impossible to ignore. While commercial revenues remained impressive, the lack of Champions League qualification meant reduced television payments and prize money. Sponsors began questioning whether association with an underperforming team, regardless of its star power, was delivering the brand enhancement they had invested in. The economic model that had seemed so revolutionary was showing cracks in its foundation. Stadium atmospheres during the final months of the Perez era reflected the growing disconnect between expectation and reality. The Santiago Bernabeu, once one of football's most intimidating venues, had become a place where individual moments of brilliance flickered briefly before being extinguished by tactical confusion. Supporters who had initially embraced the Galacticos concept with enthusiasm now watched with resignation as another promising attack broke down due to lack of coordination. The contrast with Barcelona's trajectory during this period was particularly painful for Madrid supporters to witness. Their greatest rivals had assembled a young, dynamic team that played with the kind of collective intensity and tactical sophistication that the Galacticos had somehow lost along the way. When Barcelona's success continued while Madrid's declined, it served as a constant reminder of different approaches to building sustainable excellence in modern football. The Galacticos project stands as football's most ambitious dream and its most expensive cautionary tale. It proved that while you can buy superstars, you cannot purchase chemistry, unity, or the intangible qualities that transform talented individuals into championship teams. The beautiful game had learned a lesson that would echo through boardrooms and training grounds for generations to come.